think I will remove this. I'll remove this. Now, in HTML, we have two types of elements. We have block elements and inline elements. Now, block elements stretch from left to right. So they stretch from their width, or they stretch from the left up to the right. But inline elements do not stretch from the left to the right. They just stretch up to what their content draws them to. So they stretch from the left up to what the width or their content stretches them up to, and then they stop. They don't stretch from left to right. So a block element, like I said, stretches from left to right, and the next element or its siblings starts at the next under it, or on the next line. So it starts under it. But inline elements starts from the left up to the width of its content, and then the next element following it starts from there up to the next, or up to the width of its content, and so on. Then when it reaches here, it goes down and begins from the next line. So that's block elements and inline elements. Now, what are types of block elements? Block elements are the div element, the paragraph, the block quote. Now let me demonstrate. Let's write the div and say this is a block element. Now let's save. Now this is now here, it doesn't really show it just shows the text. But now to see how the element stretches, or to see how it stretches from this left to the right, now we'll go to our dev tools. To go to your dev tools, you right click, go to inspect. Go to inspect. Now we head over to the elements tab. Now this elements tab now shows us the HTML source of our current tab, or our current browser that we are in. So it shows us the HTML source, and whenever we hover over any element, it shows us the corresponding highlight of where the element is positioned in the left side of our browser, or wherever you position the dev tools. So you see that this dev tool is very good as a beginner in HTML and CSS. So you must befriend this web tool, because it helps you so much to teach you about your HTML elements contained in your web page, to inspect it, also to debug, and also add styling to your HTML elements. In fact, I use this dev tool for my development. So I'll just, like, after writing my HTML elements, I come here and style first. Then whatever styling that I get, I copy it and move it over to my CSS. We will come to the CSS part very soon. So now let's open up our div element. So like I said, I told you that we have parents and child. So you see that this header element is rendered after this HTML element is in between the tags. Then you see this body is rendered in between these tags. So, and if you hover over this HTML element, you see that it encompasses this whole page. So you see this blue highlight there. So you see it encompasses everything. Now the header, like I told you, is non-presentational. So it is not rendered here. It just holds meta information. So that's why you do not see any highlight in the left part of this browser. Now you look at the body, you see the highlight at the left. You see the highlight there. So when we open it up, you see that it contains our div element. Now forget this script; it's just been inserted by our HTML extension. So you see that this is our div. So I hovered over it. You see the highlight here by the left. You see that it stretches from the left to the right. You see that it stretches from the left to the right. So nothing stops. It just stretches from the left to the right, and the next element following it begins from under it here. So you see it when we highlight it. So you see it. So this is what we call the block element. It stretches over the block, over the content block of its parent. It stretches up to the width of its parent, not the height, the width. That's what makes up the block element. Now let's look at the inline elements. Inline elements are span, bold, quote elements. Now let's look at another block element like the paragraph. Now let's run that. See it here. See that it started from here. The next after here, after the div element, it started at the next line. So now you see it started at the next line after the div element. So that's what the block element does. They stretches over the entirety of the of its parent width. Then the next element following it must start at the new line under it. So that's what we call block element. Now let's look at inline element. For example, the span. Now let's write span here. Now this span element is an inline element. It does not stretch from the left to the right. It stretches and stops after the width of its content. Now let's look at it. So you see. So you see that it stretches up to the text. This is a span element. So it stretches up. It just takes the width of its content and stops there. So now the next element following it will start from this. Now let's add another inline element. Like let's add the italics element. This is an italics element. So you see the italics element starts after the at the end of the span element. You see it starts after the end of the span element, starts after it. So inline does not push the next element down. So you see it starts right after it and also stops here. See it? So it does not even move to the entirety of the width of its parent element. So that's why we say that span and italics elements are inline elements, while the div element and the paragraph element are block elements. Now let's render a div after a span after a let's render a block element after an inline element and see what happens. So now you see it starts on a new line and then stretches to the complete width of each element. So it starts at a new line and also stretches at the complete width of its parent width. Remember, it does not take up the whole, it does not take up the height. It only starts from a new line and stretches up to the width, the entirety of its parent width. If this parent of this development stopped here, then it will stretch up to that point. If the parent element stopped here, it will stretch up to that point. Now let's look at it. Now let's make this paragraph to be inside this div, to be a child of this div. Now let's look at it. So it's now this paragraph is now a child, so it's stretched up to the point of this div. Now in this course, now let me also show you how we can change the styling of this div. Now this div, whenever we click on an element here, the styling of it shows on under the style tag here. So it shows the styling of this element that is being highlighted here that we clicked on it. So we can even come here and add an additional element, an additional styling here. Now to let's just make this width stop here to demonstrate that this block element will also stop here. So now let's just come down here and write width. Let's just write with 100. So you see now this div now you see the width. So the width because we specified width, the width is now 100, so it stretches over to the width of 100 pixels. And then now the p element there took up the entirety of the width 100 pixels. So it does not stretch up to here because its parent took up a width up to here. So a div element, a block element stretches up to the width, of its element. So if the parent's width is 100, its width it will stretch up to 100 width. If it is 200, it will stretch up. So if we try adjusting this width, you see that the paragraph also extends. So you see, it extends. So you see, the width of the paragraph takes up the same width of its parent, which is the div, because the paragraph it's a block element, so it stretches up to the width of its parent.